every time I go on the subreddit or anytime someone discusses the stats, I get excited because I like discussing the more analytical stuff about League of Legends. How good this player is, what they're doing, in the context of their team, etc., etc. But it frustrates me because a lot of people use the stats for evil, and they use these stats to push false narratives like Piglet is an A tier ADC, or blank is a good jungler, when some of these things are just not true. And people will be dubious about it. They'll say like, "Oh, blank has a high KDA, so he's a good player." No, that's not always the case. You have to look at what he's doing on the map, what the rest of his teammates are doing. You have to pull all of this context together, and a lot of it you can do with the stats. Like if you were to say Teddy is the best ADC in Korea, you have a lot of information that can back you up if you were to say that. And a lot of people would agree that he is indeed a top 3 ADC. But I'm going to start off really basic, and I'm going to start by going through all of the stats one by one, explaining, how they relate to each other and how you can draw conclusions by reading these stats. And then I'm going to take some examples like Teddy is the best ADC in Korea and either support or refute them by looking at these stats. And this is kind of triggered by, last week I saw a thread on the front page of Reddit, basically saying that when the rest of the team couldn't step up, Bang also didn't step up. And a lot of people were saying, no, this guy's wrong. Bang is one of the best ADCs in all of Korea. And it's like, you only really have a few stats that can back that up. And it's just frustrating because they either don't know, or they're lying to themselves, or trying to just prove a point with dubious information. So I'm just going to get into it with oracleselixir.com. Fantastic website. Thank you very much, Tim, for running it and for giving us all of these stats for free. You can go by team, region, you can go by player, you can go by champions in any given year, any split, and it'll show you, you can go by league even, by champions. Like if you wanted to see the stats for Rise in LCK 2018, by all means you can go research that. So if you ever need stats, come to Oracle's Elixir. It has everything you'll ever want. So I'm going to start off, the obvious stuff: games played, how many games you played; win percentage, how many games you've won; kills, deaths, assists. We all know what that is. KDA is your kills and assists added up divided by the deaths, which is why you're going to see, oh, Bang has a 9.6 KDA. That means he doesn't die. That means he's good. We're going to get to that later. I'm going to tell you why that's not true. Kill participation is if your team has 100 kills, like in Mowgli's sample size right here in 10 games. If your team has 100 kills and you have 80 kills or assists, then you have a kill participation of about 80%. And that's basically how active you are with your team and how often you will enable your teammates to get a kill on the map somewhere. So if we look at, Mowgli in the jungle, we can assume wherever he goes, it is very likely that he is looking for a kill. Or if there are any team fights, it is likely that he is going to be getting a kill or an assist. Next is the share of the team's deaths, the death percentage, which is, we're not going to look at Rush because he only has a sample size of 2 games. So if we look at Blossom, he has 18 games and 57 deaths. 57 deaths is 35% of his team's total deaths, which generally you want that number to be low, and in turn, that number will be lower as well. Also depending on the sample size, because, Rush has 2 games, 3 deaths, but a death percentage of 43%. So that either means, that does mean that in those 2 games, despite only dying 3 times, that is a majority compared to his teammates of like how much everyone else died. So this means his teammates probably only died like once or 0 times while he was on the Rift. Whereas if we take someone like Blossom, who has a larger sample size, death percentage, this is more of an indicator of how easy will it be to catch him out or kill him, or how reckless does he play. Or, there are a lot of inferences you can make when it comes to death percentage share of team stats. It's a bit of a dubious stat if you only look at it by itself, because like I just showed you, you also have to look at the number of deaths, the number of games played, to kind of get the full story. So, just to reiterate, Rush, 2 games, 3 deaths, almost 50% death rate. That means he is dying a lot relative to his team, but his team is not dying a lot. So that's a good thing. Whereas if you have 57 deaths and you still have a very high number, that means you are dying a lot more than you probably should be. First blood rate, kind of obvious how often you are involved with a first blood. So again, we're going to ignore the 5 sample size and go to score. KT Rolster, 41 games, he has a first blood percentage of 51%. So that means in 20 of those games, or 21 of those games, he has enabled his team to get first blood by himself. So that means wherever he goes, it is likely that he is going to be trying to get first blood if you haven't already gotten it already. Now, the next stat, average gold difference at 10 minutes. This is another one that people will pull on to, prove that someone is good because, oh, look at how much gold they're up at 10 minutes. But we can look at small sample size of 2 games. He's up 220 gold at 10 minutes. Despite having a first blood rate of 0%, that means he's probably just out farming his jungler. And we can look at that when we get to future stats. But if we take someone, Peanut, 35 games, much larger sample size, his gold down is 173. That means very consistently he will be either out farming you, or if we look at his first blood percentage, 50% of the games he gets a first blood, he will either be out farming you, or he will have gotten first blood, or in the very rare game that he is behind on gold, then maybe you're doing something very right. But again, this is another stat that requires a little more context, because we can look at, well, experience is kind of the same as gold. It's just showing us, how much XP they're up at 10 minutes, which kind of goes hand in hand with the gold. It's not very often that you'll have someone like Beyond with, only up by 40 gold, but up by 135 experience. That normally means he's getting kills or out farming, which by these stats, it doesn't really look like he's out farming, which is why I'm going to move into the next stat, creep difference at 10 minutes. If we look at Beyond right here, we could see in a sample size of 40 games, he has a 38% first blood rate, so that's about 17 games he's gotten first blood for his team, or he's gotten the assist on a first blood for his team. Average 39 gold up. So that means he's normally very, very even with his opponent in the jungle, whether he's out farming them by maybe 1 or 2 raptors, or if he got an assist on a first blood, he's going to be up 39 gold. If we look at his XP, 135 up on average, that probably lends itself more to he's power farming a little more, because unless he's getting a solo first blood, creep camps are going to give more over time. But then we look at CS down at 10. He's normally at even in CS with his laner. So now we can draw the conclusion, okay, when he is up in gold or when he is up in XP at 10 minutes, it's not because he's out farming his opponent. It's probably because he got the first blood or an assist on the first blood. Which, from that conclusion, we can probably draw, and I'm just doing this off the fly, off the top of my head, but we could probably draw the conclusion that he is okay at farming, and if we deny him first blood, then he will probably fall behind, because average CS down of almost 0, that means he's going even with his jungler. But the fact that he has a little bit of gold up and a little bit of XP up, that means he's probably getting those first bloods. But if we look at his kills and assists, we can deduce that he's probably getting those assists, which means he's not going to get as much XP or as much gold, which explains why he's only up 40 gold and only up 135 XP, even though it's relatively high compared to the rest of his team. These are the conclusions that we can draw just from reading stats, and it's beautiful. You wouldn't think that anyone on MVP would be up in XP at 10 minutes, But there he is. Now, CS down, I kind of already explained that. It's just how many minions you are ahead of your lane opponent. And I already kind of jumped and drew a conclusion using this as a tool. But here's another interesting one we can get to. We're not going to use Kuzan because he only has 2 games. But if we look at Peanut, he is generally up 5 CS at 10 minutes, which means he is up in XP on average. He's up in gold on average, and because he half the time gets first blood, you're also able to deduce that he pretty often either gets first blood or takes the farm lead, which is how he gets the XP and the gold lead, which probably means he's just straight up the better jungler. And if you watch him play, you're gonna know that yes, he is the better jungler. CS per minute is normally going to be the highest on ADCs because we're going to kind of transition into this next thing too. CS per minute is generally going to be high on ADCs because they get a higher CS percentage post 15 minutes. So this is how many minions you kill per minute. And in solo queue, if it is 10, then you're probably much, much better than everyone else in the game. If it's, 9 or 8, then that's like really good, but that's solo queue. If we look at CS per minute in LCK, if you're not getting above 10, then what are you doing with your life? And as you can see, these are all ADCs, and then UCal is the mid. That just barely breaks 10 too. So we also have to look at how much CS are they getting once the laning phase ends. And this really helps you tell the story. Because if you just take, oh, Teddy has 11 CS per minute, that must mean he's really good at CSing in the laning phase. It's like, yeah, kind of. That kind of tells the story. But he's probably getting 11 CS per minute because he's getting 33% of all the CS on the map after laning phase is over. So you cannot really have one without the other right here, because if you just say he has 11.6 CS per minute, that doesn't necessarily mean he's gonna have 160 farm at 15 minutes. He might if he's having a really, really good game, or if his name is Uzi. But you also have to look at, the average game length that he's in, and this stat right here, average share of teams post 15-minute minions, which Teddy gets the most of, which is one of the contributing reasons as to why he has 11 CS per minute. And it's the same story with all of these other guys right here. Like, you see 30% to Deft, 10.8 minions a minute. He's not getting 11 minions a minute during the laning phase. He's also getting a lot of that CS, which will inflate his numbers later after the laning phase has ended. Now, we're going to go to another kind of dubious stat, damage per minute, which is average damage to champions per minute. It sounds pretty straightforward, but you also have to consider, what stages of the game are they trading? Like, if you have an average game time of 20 minutes and your DPM is almost 700, then you must be playing some real heavy aggressive bullshit in lane to get those kinds of numbers, because you have to think about the HP values that you're going to be fighting against. You have to think about your own AD, and all of these different variables that will go into damage per minute. Now, if we look at Teddy, highest damage per minute, that could easily be inflated by, like, if he had a sample size of 6 games and one of those games was the hour and 40-minute game on Sivir that he had, where he had 1500 farm or some ridiculous number like that, then that would easily inflate and blow up all of these stats. But go back to the sample size, 44 games. So that means that one outlier is not going to very much affect how much damage and CS he got, or how much, the stat is going to be inflated. So thank God he has an average over 44 games, because some of those games he might have 200 damage per minute, or it might be just a 25-minute surrender and he's playing Vayne and he only did 200 damage the whole game, something like that. So thank God he has a very large sample size, which is going to help us come to why does he have 700 damage per minute? Well, it might have something to do with the fact that he's dealing the most damage out of any other player on his team. And compared to everyone else in the league, he does more damage for his entire team than anyone else. So that is a reasonable excuse as to why he might have almost 700 DPM, because they're relying on him, and for the most part, only him to deal the damage. Because when you have 35% of your damage on one person, that means 65% is on the other 4. So they're all not doing a lot of damage. But that's something we can also, look at all of his teammates' stats. So if we go to the lowest damages, it's mostly junglers and supports, like, Ignar, Rush, Wraith. So if we look at Wraith, Generic Green Wings, the support for Teddy, he does 6% of the damage for his team. So 6 plus 35 is going to be 41. So we already kind of get, okay, now the bot lane does 40% or 41% of the damage for the entire team. That's average, if you think about it, because 2 champions are going to deal 40% of the damage. They're going to have 40% of the gold share. You're wrong. That's not the right way to think, because you also have to consider the top laner, the mid laner, and the jungler. You can't just take, if you're one person and you have 20% of your team's deaths, that's average. No, it also depends on your positioning. It also depends on your playstyle. Like, if I have 20 deaths as a tank, then that probably means I'm doing my job well, because I'm tanking so much damage before I die. Whereas if I have 20 deaths on an ADC, I'm not doing my job well, because I'm dying. So if we look at damage percentage, if I'm doing little to no damage as a support, who cares? I'm probably Braum, or I'm Janna, or I'm Soraka, or in very few cases I'll be Morgana, or Brand, or Annie, and only a few of those champions, only a few of the support champions will be dealing damage. So if you say, Ignar only has 5% of the damage on his team, what is he even doing? He's probably playing Janna. Because, okay, shut up. Windows. He's probably playing Janna, because you have to consider the player's position, and you have to consider all of his teammates, and what they're doing on the map, and what champions they play. You can have all of these stats, but unless you know the champions they're playing, what kind of comps they're playing, what kind of style they play, it is going to be dubious as to how you explain these stats. Now we're going to move on to average gold per minute. This is generally going to go to the carries, like mid or ADC. Like if we see here, ADC, Khan, top, ADC. This is just an indicator of how much money this person is going to be earning, and can kind of be deduced by, what's their CS percentage. 33%, that might have something to do with how much gold he's earning. What's his CS per minute? 11.2, that might have something to do with how much gold he's earning. How many kills, what's his KDA? How many kills does he have? He has 80% kill participation, so that might also have something to do with how much gold he's earning. These are all of the ways that the stats will influence each other. Then we have gold percentage, which is kind of a combination of average gold earned per minute and things like how much damage they deal, or damage percentage, KDA, kill participation. All of these stats can mold together to form how important is this player to his team. So gold percentage, almost 30% for Teddy. We can very reasonably deduce, just from reading the stat sheet alone, that Teddy is the only player on Generic Green Wings. Or at the very least, he is the most important player on Generic Green Wings. Does that mean he is the best player in X position? Who knows? We'll have to go further. But we can accurately say Teddy is probably the most valuable person on Generic Green Wings, because you see his gold percentage is the highest out of any other person in the league. His damage percentage, highest out of any other person. His CS per post 15, highest. So you can You can just use these stats and say, man, Jin Air really loves Teddy. They're feeding the crap out of Teddy, and they need him to win the games for them. As a statistician or as an analyst, you're going to see that, and you're going to think, all right, let's focus Teddy. Let's just go bot and gank bot every single time. Because what is another Jin Air Green Wings member that you have seen me reference so far that wasn't his support? There you go. That's a little bit of analytical advice for you. And then we have wards per minute and wards cleared per minute. It's just an indicator of, how often they put down wards. So we can see Spirit in 31 games, 2 wards a minute. He loves putting down some vision. But now we have to consider Green Smite is gone. So how will this change these stats coming into the next split? Are they going to make Spirit, build that support item that gives him wards? That's a reasonable question to ask, considering, all of these players with super high wards per minute, jungle, support, jungle. It's not unlikely to see supports up here, but considering it's all junglers, are we going to see those support items go into the jungle just so they have wards? Or is that change going to go through from Riot where they're going to just completely negate buying a support item if you have Machete, and how will that affect how many wards they put down a minute? That's a good question to ask. How will these jungle changes affect the vision game? How will it, change how many wards they put down? Where will they put down the wards if they have less wards? These are good questions to ask, and some that you can research with context by watching VODs. That's going to be the major thing about, applying these stats. And then the last stat is wards cleared per minute. So it's reasonable that if you're putting down wards, you're probably clearing a lot of wards too. And, Wolf, cause Spirit, also very high in wards per minute. Wards cleared per minute, self-explanatory. So now that I've kind of gone through, the relationships between these stats, how they kind of interact with one another, and how you can tell a story with these stats, I'm going to take a claim, one that I kind of already alluded to. Let's say Teddy is the best ADC in Korea. So let's look at the stats and see why Teddy might be an argument for the best ADC in Korea. If we consider starting ADCs, so someone like Aiming, who only has 7 games, we're not going to really consider him. Games played can also be a little bit of a variable because they are on the best of 3s. So if you have 40 plus games, you're in there. Win percentage, okay. Teddy's team does not win a lot, but that's not really his fault. However, we can see Teddy has the most kills by far out of any other ADC. Okay, that's a good stat to have, but that doesn't really tell us that he's the best ADC. Deaths, 64 deaths, that's in the high range. That's 12 less deaths than, the highest person with deaths, whereas, okay, once again, ignoring Aiming, ignoring Maha to an extent, Teddy has a lot more deaths than Kramer, who has 34 games played, which goes into the KDA, which, again, I'll explain in just a second. Assists, we can see Teddy, he doesn't have the most assists. He has a very good number of assists. If we look at, all of these numbers surrounding him, all of the games played, for that number of assists in, as many games played as, Deft, who has only 7 more assists, or Songyun, who has 1 less assist, but in 1 more game. This is a pretty good number of assists. Prey, though, he has the most assists. Now you have to ask yourself, is that because other people on his team are playing carries and getting the kills, and he's playing a support ADC that would enable other people to get those kills? That's a good question to ask. That's something that we can add to our research later. But right now we're talking about Teddy, and we're going to try to deduce, is he the best Korean ADC? Now we look at the KDAs. We have Bang 9.6, that's really good. Prey 8.2, really, really good. Ignoring Aiming. Kramer 7.9, really good. But then we get down to Teddy 5.4, Deft 5.0. You know, these aren't bad, but it's not 9.6. That's when you have to ask yourself, are they playing more aggressive ADCs? Are they getting caught out more? Is, you know, what are his teammates doing? I'm in the middle of something.
Boy, cunt.
I know.
What are you in the middle of?
I'm making a YouTube video.
Oh.
Yeah. I was waiting for him to open it again. Anyway, we look at the KDAs, and you know these are elite level KDAs, 9.6 and 8.2. But you have to ask yourself, you know, is 5.4 a bad KDA for an ADC? No, not at all. It's not a terrible KDA. It's not 3.2 like Ruler has, or you know 3.4 like Ghost. But you know, it's middle of the road. It's average. It's pretty good if you want to consider global averages, or you know even compare it to your own KDA in solo queue. If you have a 5 KDA in solo queue, then you're pretty good. In LCK though, if you have a 5 KDA, you're probably pretty good relative to your competition. So Teddy, you know, if someone says that Teddy is a bad ADC because he has a 5.4 KDA, they're just lying to themselves. They're being an asshole, and they're being stupid. So it's because they're not considering, you know, how many kills does he have, how many assists does he have, you know, how good is his team? Because if the rest of your team is dying, then it's likely that you are also going to die, unless your name is Bang, wherever he is, where you can get 5th place in the split but only die 35 times in 46 games. That's actually less than 1 death a game, which is, you have to ask yourself at that point, is he just not putting himself in situations where he would die, or is like the rest of his team dying before he can get to the fight? These are questions you have to ask, and you can answer by watching the VODs. But anyway, continuing to talk about Teddy. Highest kill participation. We already know that he's probably going to have the highest kill participation because his team relies on him to carry. You can also see this by, like, okay, he has 340 kills and assists, which is 80% of his team's total kills. So he's in there whenever they are fighting for the most part. That's all that stat really tells us, is he is there when most of the fights break out. Or he is there when Jennair wants to make a play for kills. So 80% of the time, they are playing around Teddy to get these kills. Then we have share of team's deaths. I think if we go by like this, okay, he actually dies very little compared to like the rest of his team, and in general, next to his ADC peers, he dies less than average. You know, you look at someone like, again, Bang, who he only has 35 deaths, but that's 9% of the deaths on his team. His team has a lot of deaths, whereas you almost double that number for Teddy, but the percentage doesn't get doubled. That means, although he is dying more than Bang, the rest of his team is dying more than SK Telecom's team. So there you can deduce that Teddy's team sucks. And we've already come to the conclusion that his team wants him to carry. So can we ask ourselves, are his stats inflated because his team doesn't do anything and they really rely on him to do everything? First blood percentage among ADCs. We're taking out aiming because he only has 7 games played. But, you know, we look at Kramer, 35%, Ghost. These aren't high numbers because they're not junglers, or they're not supports who are going to be roaming, or they're not top laners that are going to be teleporting for the first blood play. But this kind of tells us, you know, 23% of his team's first bloods, he's there for it, which probably means that either his team does not get first blood, or when they do get first blood, like half the time it's not going to be on him. And don't quote me on the half because that's just a number I pulled out of my head. But it's likely that even when his team doesn't, or does get first blood, he's probably not getting it. That we could probably write a more full story by going to, his jungler and his supports first blood percentage stat, and if they're all like equally low, then we can say, okay, even though they only get first blood in 23% of their games, then they're getting it on Teddy for all of those games. It's like one of those things, 60% of the time it works 100% of the time, but we can't tell that full story because we aren't looking at those other stats. So this, again, going to be a dubious number. If someone says Kramer is a good ADC because he gets 35% of the team's first bloods, then, maybe it's a little dubious. Average gold difference at 10 minutes among ADCs. Where is Teddy? Teddy is right in the middle. He's normally even with his ADC when it comes to gold and XP. 13 is not going to really matter too much. CS down. So these are average stats for what we have already seen to be is an otherwise great ADC. So we can ask ourselves, is he being held back by his support, or, is he being camped, which is why he can't CS so much? That's a reasonable question and a reasonable conclusion to come to because we know that Teddy is the only good player on Jin Air. So is he at these average stats because they know they want to keep him down? Probably. Does the fact that they want to keep him down mean he is a good ADC? Maybe. CS per minute, we already talked about, even though he has the highest CS per minute, he's also getting the highest CS percentage post 15. So if we look at all of these 5 stats together, we can see, okay, he doesn't do much during the laning phase, or he's kept down during the laning phase, or something happens where he can't get ahead during the laning phase. But in the late game, he's going to be doing stuff. He's going to be farming. He's going to be getting all of that money. So if you're an analyst looking at this, you can ask yourself, before you go through the VODs, is he being kept down, or is he just bad during the laning phase? If he's bad during the laning phase, then you can just make the rest of his team lose, and then despite the fact that he's getting such a huge gold share post 15 minutes, he's probably still going to lose because the rest of his team, he's going to be 1v9. So, something to consider. Damage per minute, again, kind of the same thing as the CS share. He's probably being relied on only as their main source of damage, which is why his number is so inflated. Because it's very clear that he is getting most of the gold post 15 minutes, despite the fact that he has a very average laning phase. And you can kind of see it with his kill count too. He has the most kills out of all ADCs, but that's probably because it's alright, nobody else can get these kills, just put them on Teddy so he can carry us. Damage percentage, he has the highest damage percentage of his team. Again, goes into the CS per minute, the CS post 15 DPM. He's being relied on in the late game. That's really all we can say about that. Average gold earned per minute. So, he has, okay, not counting aiming, he has the highest average gold per minute. But, as we've already seen, in the laning phase, he's not really getting much gold. So, this is probably inflated by the fact that he has so many kills and the fact that he gets so much after 15. So, we can probably tell ourselves they're going to want to put him on a late game hyper carry, which you can see by the fact that he was on Sivir several times. And, that's how he puts out all this damage. That's how he gets all that gold, because he's being fed all this farm. And, now we're starting to see the story. Is Teddy really a good ADC, or is he just the only good player on his team? He gets the most gold on his team out of every other ADC, and then the wards don't really matter. So what can we deduce from, Teddy and these stats without watching any of the VODs to actually look at his positioning and the way he fights in team fights and the way he catches waves? All of these other things that matter when it comes to this discussion of best player, but we can't see by looking at the stats. We can definitely tell ourselves that Teddy is pretty good. He is the only good player on his team, and they rely on him very heavily to win the game for them. If we go with that conclusion, that his team basically only wins the game when Teddy is fed. He led his team to victory 43% of the time. Now imagine if he had another human being on his team that could also be enabled for victory. Would we see all of Teddy's stats start to fall off because now, oh, he has a mid laner that can help him out? Well, maybe not, because we can go through all of these stats again, and we can see where the, not KSV, like KT Rolster, or a Freak of Freaks, or Kingzone's ADC's stats are lined up, you know? So we can kind of compare and contrast. Kingzone Prey, 83% win rate. Prey has, okay, a lot of the kills, few deaths. Prey has the most assists, very high KDA, but he also has, you know, BDD in the mid lane and Khan in the top lane. So let's go to these stats over here, like the gold percentage. Where's Prey on this list? Prey is not even in the top 10. Where is he? Prey gets 24.3% of the gold for his team compared to 28.9% for Teddy. Does that mean Prey is worse for his team? No, that just means Prey can be deferred when it comes to who carries in the later stages of the game. Average gold earned per minute, he's still averaging a lot of gold per minute, but he's not getting the highest gold percentage. What about damage percentage? He only has 30% of the team's damage compared to Teddy's almost 35. So this is still like in line with most ADCs, but you know, compared to the rest of his stats, he doesn't look that good on paper, but you know, he's on Kingzone Dragon Axe. You know, Prey damage per minute 633. That's very good. But is it lower than Teddy's because he doesn't have to put out as much damage himself because people like Khan and BDD and Peanut are on his team? Probably. Now, I'm not going to say that Prey is a better ADC than Teddy right here, but these are conclusions that you can try to draw yourself when looking at all of these stats. Like, Prey, average share of teams post 15-minute gold. Where's Prey on this list? He's last. He gets the least amount of gold out of all ADCs post 15 minutes, but he still puts up very high DPM. He still gets a very high gold per minute. CS per minute, Prey 10.4, you know, pretty good for ADCs. CS down per minute. Oh, he's actually doing something in the laning phase. He's up in farm during laning phase. So from this, we could say, okay, maybe Prey is better during the laning phase than Teddy, but you know, Teddy is still a better ADC because his team relies on him more. Maybe? Nah. Maybe. These are questions you have to ask yourself when you look at these stats, because you can only get so much without looking at the actual gameplay. And that is kind of the main point I want to make right now. You can have all of these stats and you can have everything point to, man, Teddy has, you know, highest kills, average KDA, highest kill participation, not very high death percentage, you know, average first blood percentage, but he gets a lot of gold and a lot of average gold and damage, and like, he can have all of these highest stats, but that doesn't make him the top ADC because we're lacking the context of his other teammates. And then on top of that, we're not watching the gameplay. So if you go into a game and you watch the game and you say, wow, Teddy's positioning, something that can't be quantified by stats, although it kind of can because of the number of deaths, but it can't really because he doesn't even have a very high death percentage compared to the rest of his teammates. Like, these are all the things you have to consider. And unless you watch the game, you 100% cannot tell the full story. Because at the same time, like, you can make the claim Doublelift was one of the best ADCs at MSI. But then I can show you a clip of Doublelift walking next to a bush with Braum in it, and it's like, good ADCs don't do that. And, you know, that's true. They don't make stupid mistakes. Teddy, I could probably do the same thing for you. You know, cherry pick one bad play, and it's like, do good ADCs do this? No? That's another way that someone's probably going to be dubious. That happened when I was talking about Bang not being the best ADC in Korea, someone said, "Oh, it's really hard to carry when your jungler does 600 damage on Kha'Zix." It's like that was literally one game out of 46 that Bang couldn't carry because of his jungler only doing 600 damage. What about the other 45 games? And that's something you have to consider. Just because he couldn't carry one game doesn't mean he's not bad, but when you consistently can't carry games and your win percentage is only 50 and you don't have the most kills, but you have almost the high, like you have the highest KDA, but you don't have the highest damage percentage or the damage per minute, then you know you start to get a little more context, and then you actually watch the games, and it's like, all right, he doesn't die a lot because his teammates keep getting caught out, so he just never goes to the fight, which is why he doesn't die, or something along those lines. And that just kind of continues to reinforce my main point. You need to watch the games. The stats can tell you a lot. The stats can tell you almost everything. But unless you actually watch the gameplay, like unless you watched Season 3 Cop protect his KDA by just not going to fights very often or only going to fights that he knew he could be a part of. Like if you watch him kite around the outside of a fight and then walk away with a few assists, but like 0 deaths, it's like, yeah, his KDA got raised. But it's like, then you have someone like Meteos who had like a 30 KDA on Zac, which is full face into the enemy team. It's like, oh my god, what is he doing? How does he live? What? It's like, that's how you know he was a good jungler, because he had such a high KDA, and the way he played should not have given him a high KDA. So, you have to watch the games to understand it. And there are so many other examples I can give over the course of the LCS history, the LCS era, and all of it just really boils down to the numbers matter, but not as much as you think they do. Shout out to Freak, who put Piglet as their A tier ADC because he said he has the highest stats, and because when in their wins, he enables the team to win. But they only had like 3 wins. It's like, what about those other games? What's happening in those other games? Oh, Piglet got caught out. Oh, the team just lost a team fight. X, Y, and Z happen. And it's like, you can trust his opinion more because he is, like, it's his job to watch all of the games. But the way he tried to present the information was, like, trying to not trick you into thinking the way he does, but he manipulated the stats to try to show us, like, look at his stats in the wins versus his teammates, and then the stats in the loss versus his teammates, and it's still like a sample size of 3. That doesn't tell the whole story. So it's just, you have to absolutely, and I'm going to keep repeating it, keep in mind the actual player's gameplay. Because let's go to Uzi. Who is the best ADC in the world, and the stats are really bad here because LPL statistics are limited due to the data access. So we don't have the full story even on here. But if we look for Uzi, like, kills, where's Uzi? Am I in the LPL? Yeah, I'm in the LPL. Let's see, Invictus, where's Uzi on this list? Assists, maybe he's up there on there. I don't see him. He's not in the top 10. KDA, there's Uzi, 5.6 KDA. But like, these stats, even compared to his peers, that's why 25 games played, because he was sharing games with Abel. So if you have some asshole telling you, oh, Uzi doesn't even have the most kills, that's because his sample size is lower. KDA, though, top 3. Kill participation, not very high. But then again, you have to consider, oh, this guy only had 14 games played. Oh, that guy only had 8 games played. Like, the stats are not going to show you the full story. If someone says Uzi's not the best ADC in the world because he's not even top 10 when it comes to number of kills in the LPL, then they're a retard. They're just a fucking idiot. Like, there's no other way to put it. Win percentage? Oh, clearly Hopes is the best ADC in the LPL. Like, who even talks about Uzi? This guy's 100% win rate. Like, there's probably someone out there who would consider that. But we know we're all smarter than that. It's a shame that we don't have all of the stats that we did for LPL to kind of go into Uzi. But, you know, we can actually... Where is... Oh, I don't think... MSI Main Stage 2018. Let's look at these stats. Let's compare the top ADCs across the world at MSI. Betty, Doublelift, Prey, Reckles, Slay, and Uzi. KDA, Uzi, 8.6. Kills, wow. Assists, only Prey had more, which is consistent with what he did in the LCK. Death percentage. Let's see. Wow, Reckles. He's pretty good. He's a pretty good player. First blood percentage, Betty. That's, I mean, this stat can get a little weird depending on, you know, what the jungler or the team's priority is. But, you know, we can go down the list right here. Gold down, we have, you know, Uzi, most gold. XP, Betty and Uzi. CS down, he is the only player with above 1 CS down at 10. And it's at 9. Clearly, he is better than everyone else at this competition. CS per minute. Well, we have to consider how much CS does he get past 15 minutes. Okay, so kind of makes sense. Kind of makes sense. Coupled with the fact that he is winning laning phase, like, that is a lot of money he's going to be getting. Damage per minute, that's how much he was enabled by his team. That's how much he was trading in lane. So we can reasonably deduce that Uzi was probably the best ADC at the tournament. Because, like, look at Doublelift's. He has 650 damage per minute. He gold down, you know, relatively even during laning phase on average. You know, but again, I can say, according to the stats, Uzi was the best. But it can be, like, we all know that's true because we saw the games. But that's because we saw the games. We have to look at those games and, like, I said, okay, clearly Reckless had the least damage percentage share of his team. It's clearly the worst ADC at MSI. It's like, no, you can't say that. Damage per minute, Reckless below 600. Clearly he sucks. CS share, he had the second most CS share, but not a very high damage percentage. What's going on here? We have to watch the games to find out. And that's where I'm going to kind of leave it, because, again, no matter all of the stats you have, they do tell a very nice story, but you absolutely need to watch the games at the very least. And it, like, I hope this video was, like, good in the sense that it taught you something about how you can form a story with the stats, how you can look at the stats and see, you know, I can prove X, Y, and Z point by looking at the stats. Like, Reckless had the tied for second least amount of deaths. Clearly, he's the second best ADC, because we're not counting Betty because he sucks. Yeah, go us. And it's like, okay, guys, let's consider how many kills he had compared to his peers. Consider his assists. Consider his playstyle, how he played during the laning phase. You have to also consider what teams he got those deaths against, because our sample sizes are pretty low, 18 to 10. So even with this kind of condensed stats, we can get a more full story if they all had 40 games, but they don't. So this is the best we can do. And from this, we can deduce, probably, mostly, that Uzi, according to the stats, don't forget to add that, was the best ADC at the tournament. If you could back it up with gameplay, then bully for you, but you probably don't have to. But if you wanted to argue who's the second best ADC, then you could say, oh, Betty has the higher KDA, but Prey had more kills and assists, but, you know, Reckless died the least compared to all ADCs. This is where you can, you know, start to form your points. And this video went on a lot longer than I thought it was going to, but I hope it was very, I forget the word I was going to say. I hope it was inspirational. I hope it taught you something. I hope that you upvote it on Reddit. Vote manipulation. I hope that you enjoyed yourself. I hope that I taught you something. And I hope that you have a very good Memorial Day. And I hope that everyone is happy for the rest of their lives. Amen. God bless America. I'm not even a Christian.